Peter Buttrick, Senior Associate Dean, and I want to just take the opportunity to introduce this seminar series and also to introduce Accords. The seminar series, which is euphemistically called Cores Are Us, the name came because somebody on our advisory committee had small children. It's an opportunity for our research cores to share with the broader campus their capabilities and how they can facilitate research broadly on the campus. It's an opportunity for the entire community to appreciate the strengths of our just to appreciate and advertise the strengths of our research infrastructure. What we've done with the talks from last year is we've recorded them and linked them to the website so that they're accessible to people who can't make the seminar. And I think that's been working reasonably well. So thank you all for coming. Also, thank you very much to Allie and her team for kicking off this season's Cores Are Us seminar series. And also thank you to the entire Accords community for all that you do for the campus. Accords, for those of you who didn't know, we now know what it stands for. Looking at the first slide, it's a real world opportunity. It's a real world impact community that can assess health services research that spans the life cycle. Accords has been hugely impactful in facilitating research opportunities across the campus, and I think is really a source of enormous institutional pride. I'll stop talking and let Allie and her team outline for you what Accords can do and how they can facilitate research across the campus. Thank you very much for coming, and Allie, thank you to your team for all that you do.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's really nice to see you. And thanks for inviting us to this seminar series. I think what we're going to present is a little atypical for this forum because most of our cores and programs are methods cores and programs. They're not, laboratory. We don't, you don't give us a sample, we give you an answer. It's much more about promoting team science and giving you the kind of methodologic support you need. So I'm Allie Kempe, I'm a pediatrician and health services researcher by training, and I direct the Accords program. I'm going to first give you a little bit of an overview about the kind of science we do, how we can specifically help you. And then I've asked leaders from 3 of our major cores and programs to give brief presentations about their particular areas. And we've chosen these areas because they are of a lot of interest to a lot of scientists across the campus. We would love your questions, and we've left a good amount of time, I hope, at the end for that. But since there are 4 people, I think we'll go ahead and do the presentations, and then would ask that you put your questions in the chat so that we can have them at the end. Don't delay so you forget them. Or you can ask them, of course, at the end. But if you put them in the chat, then we'll have them. Next slide. So just to give you an overview about Accords, it was founded in 2014. It brought together 2 smaller programs in pediatrics and adult outcomes research. It has been co-supported by the School of Medicine, Office of the Dean, and Children's Hospital since that time. It is focused on the entire life spectrum. That's why it has adult and child in the name. And it is fully integrated across the School of Medicine in order to realize economies of scale. Before Accords, many different divisions, departments were trying to build up little bits of this type of science. And it really was very difficult for junior faculty and even for senior faculty to really make progress in this area. We organized the program, the center, into programs and cores with designated leaders. Next slide. So what are we talking about, T3, T4 science? There are a lot of different schedules out there, but this is how we think about it. We begin with effectiveness, as opposed to T2, which looks at efficacy in highly controlled settings. We look at effectiveness in real world settings. So that includes things like pragmatic trials in real world settings, observational, longitudinal observational studies, etc. And then next slide, the next step of that is taking that into looking at effectiveness at the population level. So many of our studies look at community or population impact. Next slide. So one of the questions I get is, how do you differ from the CCTSI? And this slide tries to sort of demonstrate some of the important differences. First of all, CCTSI is much, much larger. It supports all translational research, so T1 through T4. It includes all of these organizations and probably something else since I made the slide. So it's a very large, much larger grant organization. We do intersect in the T3, T4 area, and we are quite careful with the CCTSI not to duplicate. So I'm going to mention some of the cores and programs where there is joint funding, both from the CCTSI and from Accords, to support those programs that really focus a lot on T3, T4. Next slide. So there are a lot of names for what we do, and I only put this up here because it's very confusing, because people aren't sure if they're doing T3, T4 science. There was a lot of focus in the funding area in the last 10 years, or probably 10 plus years ago, on comparative effectiveness, on patient-centered outcomes research. These labels haven't gone away, but more cutting edge now when you look at funding is dissemination implementation science, pragmatic science, and pragmatic trials. And I think more persistent throughout the years has been health services research and outcomes research. So all of these labels apply to the kind of research we do. And the real parameter is that it's real world. Next slide. So this kind of science emphasizes external validity, the importance of what works in a particular environment, and relevance to practice and policy. So it is real world. It is by nature, because of that fact, it is multidisciplinary with a lot of collaboration required between clinical and social scientists. You can't just figure out what worked, but why it worked or why it didn't work. The outcomes we look at are often multifaceted and patient-centered. And because we're so focused on what works in real-world settings, implementation science is really key to understanding what works and doesn't work. Next slide. So the whole rationale for the importance of this kind of research is the fact that it takes about 17 years on average for 14% of research to translate into practice. Most of what we discover, you may or may not be surprised to know, is never implemented effectively. So we need to spend a lot more time focusing on how to make things work in real world settings. Next slide. Accord's strategic objectives are to promote innovative research, to guide clinical practice, to strengthen affiliations with key partners, and to promote collaboration across the campus, to increase our competitiveness for funding in T3, T4 science, and therefore achieve greater national visibility. We focus a lot on faculty development and helping people from across the campus develop in these areas. And we also focus a lot on helping all departments and divisions in recruitment of faculty who want to work in this area. Next slide. So here's our org chart. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just to show you, these are the programs and methodologic cores we have that are available for you to consult with. Next slide. These three I want to highlight are co-supported by CCTSI. The Practice-Based Research Network Core, which is a core that allows or promotes research within practice settings that have a particular structure and are interested in being involved in research. The Community Engagement and Outreach Program, which is extremely important in terms of engaging communities in both deciding what kind of research is relevant to them and helping us conduct research in community settings, and the Dissemination Implementation Program, which focuses especially on that kind of science. Next slide. So we're going to talk in more depth about these three: the Dissemination Implementation Program, Qualitative Mixed Methods Core, and Program for Patient-Centered Decisions. And I've chosen those three because two of them are the dissemination and qualitative are two of the most sought after in terms of consultation across the campus. And the Program for Patient-Centered Decisions is rather unique and also quite large, but is a great example of how multiple cores need to work together. So we're going to talk about those three in more depth. Next slide. So how does Accords advance both the research and researchers? I think of it in these four buckets. We do consultation and recruitment, we do training and education, we provide a lot of mentorship, and we build collaborative research. Next slide. We do about 350 consultations per year, and those come from at least 25 departments or divisions. And in the last year, we did 57 recruitment efforts. We supported those because those people were coming in wanting to do health services research or affiliated kind of research. So that is a lot of what we're doing. These people are, faculty are coming in for consultations either one or two times just to understand something, but more commonly they're coming in because they need co-investigators in key areas. Next slide. We provide a lot of mentorship. Consistently in the last 5 years, we've had over 50 junior faculty that we are mentoring for career development applications or awards. So this is a huge huge investment of time. Generally, these career development awards are involving 2 to 3 of our cores or programs. You know, they have a D&I mentor, they have a mixed methods, qualitative mentor, and maybe a quantitative scientist. So that's a huge effort on our emphasis of our program. We also have work in progress groups for faculty in different research areas or at different stages. And right now we have 9 of these, but they're a little bit fluid. They tend to last for a few years and then some of them go away and restart. Some of them have been very consistent. For example, this picture shows the cardiovascular group, C-Core, that has been around long before Accords, but now is housed or has their meetings at Accords. So the way this functions is we are a convening place for different scientists, either that come together because their subject matter is similar or because they are at the stage of development. We have a variety of them that, for example, are trying to get K awards. They've just come out of our fellowships. They need a peer mentor and senior mentorship group to get them to the next stage. So that's a lot of what we do as well. Next slide. And we have 2 fellowship training programs. One is a primary care research fellowship, a T32, pretty classic. We take both PhD and MD postdocs who are focused on primary care. The other one, the SCORE Fellowship, that I actually started about 10 years ago. And the reason for that was that the same requests for training were coming through for surgeons and subspecialists, but we couldn't put them into the primary care fellowship, obviously, because of the source of funding. So this one is a pay-as-you-go. It provides the department division that is putting up a faculty member is required to protect them at 50% and to give them a stipend to cover mentorship. And the training is virtually identical to the primary care fellowship. Next slide. We also do about 20 campus seminars and workshops with over 1,000 attendees per year. A couple I want to highlight, the Colorado Pragmatic Research in Health, or CopperCon, is now in its 4th year, and it is now international in terms of participation, since it's, been virtual or hybrid. This year it will be June 5th through 7th. We also have at least 2 qualitative research workshops per year, and those are now becoming national as well. And we do 2 annual seminar series. Next slide. I'm going to briefly mention that there's a new dissemination of implementation certificate that I know Russ will discuss more, that addresses the need for rigorous training in this kind of science. That is only 2 years old, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from Russ. Next slide. And then we build research. I mean, aside from all of the mentorship kind of things we're doing, we're bringing senior and mid-level and junior scientists together to create proposals. So we submit over 100 proposals yearly. We have about a 36% success rate in the last couple of years, 121 active sponsored grants at any time. And in 2022, we brought in 32 million. We've been increasing, next slide, at about 20% per year with this outlier right in the middle of the pandemic, but we're back up there in 2022. And this year, thus far, this is the first cycle. So we are projected to be about 40 million this year. So we have been growing at about 20% per year, just to give you an idea of the scope of the size of the program. Next slide. So on average, each year, we're supporting a lot of grant proposal submissions. We are acting as a virtual or a real home to many, many investigators. About 50 investigators have their offices with us, but many, I would say probably 100, 300, interdigitate with us in some way. We support a lot of junior faculty with career development awards, and we do a lot of research consultations.